Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Jacques Offenbach's Le Conte d'Hoffmann, which was shown at the Komische Oper Berlin. The conductor was Daniel Ruppert, the production was done by Barry Kosky, the set design and costumes were done by Katrin Leatag, the lights were handled by Diego Leitz, the dramaturgy was handled by Ulrich Lenz, and the chorus master was David Cavelius. Now this is yet another one of my most favorite French operas of all time, totally up there with the likes of Carmen, Samson et Dalila, Les Huguenots, Robert le Diable, Le Prophète, Le Dialogue de Carmélite, L'Africaine, Faust, Mireille, Roméo et Juliette, Manon, Werther, and Cendrillon. And this also has a lot of wonderful music, from the opening chorus of the spirits of the wine and of the beer, to l'ambiance dans le rôle dangereux, to Hoffmann's L'air de Kleinsack, to the trio done by Coppelius, Niklaus, and Hoffmann, to Niklaus's aria talking about Olympia, to Olympia's Les oiseaux dans la chamille, to Antonia's Elle a fui la tourterelle, to Franz's Jour et nuit, to the duet by Hoffmann and Antonia, C'est une chance d'amour, to the trio with Dr. Miracle, Crespel, and Hoffmann, to yet another trio with Dr. Miracle, Antonia's mother, and Antonia, Tu ne chanteras plus, to the very famous Bar Carol with Giulietta and Niklaus, the one that goes Belle nuit, oh nuit d'amour, souris à nos ivresses, nuit plus douce que le jour, oh belle nuit d'amour. Yes, this duet has become very popular for a lot of mezzos and sopranos as concert numbers, and even to having two mezzos singing this duet. And not to mention Dappertutto's Senti le Diamant, and of course the sextet with Hoffmann, Giulietta, Dappertutto, Pitichinaccio, Schlemihl, and Niklaus. Hélas, mon cœur s'égare encore, and even the final moments with the Muse and Hoffmann and the chorus. There is no doubt that this opera has something very special in my heart, as the music really sells it for me, which is also no surprise because I also have the CD starring Placido Domingo, Edita Gruberova, Andreas Schmidt, Gabriel Bacouillet, James Morris, Justino Diaz, Claudia Eda, and Christa Ludwig as the principal players. This opera also has a very interesting history, with a lot of the rewritings, rearrangements, cuts, additional arias, taking out of some of the arias, especially where Giulietta's aria, L'amour lui dit la belle, is involved. Not to mention the rearrangements, like we would usually start off with a prologue, and then the first lover would be Olympia, then we go to Antonia, then Giulietta, and then the epilogue. However, some productions would put in the Giulietta act as the second lover and having Antonia as the final culminating act before the epilogue. So there has been a lot of rearrangements, rewritings, and all that stuff. And what was also quite interesting was that the role of Hoffmann was originally conceived by a baritone before Offenbach basically recomposed it for a tenor. And nowadays, loads of tenors have made the role of Hoffmann their very own. And on top of that, it was also Offenbach's vision that the main heroines of Olympia, Antonia, and Giulietta, plus Stella, be done by the same singer. The roles of Landorf, Coppelius, Miracle, and Dappertutto be done by the same bass baritone. The roles of André, Franz, Cochenil, and Pitichinaccio be done by the same Spieltenor. And of course, a lot of the other smaller characters be done by the same singer. However, as time went on, there has been moments where a lot of different sopranos would end up embodying Olympia, Antonia, and Giulietta. What with the coloratura sopranos going to Olympia, the dramatic coloratura sopranos and the lyric sopranos going to Antonia, and the spinto and dramatic sopranos, or even in some occasions, the high dramatic mezzos going to Giulietta. And at times it is a similar case to a lot of the lower voices. Some bassos and bass baritones and dramatic baritones would go for Landorf, with some bass baritones going to Coppelius, bassos going to Dr. Miracle, and bass baritones and dramatic baritones going to Dappertutto. So there is a lot of interesting history found within this opera. But there's no doubt that this opera has been enjoying a lot of international fame and success thanks to a lot of the singers that have attempted all of these main roles. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the production, costumes, singing, conducting, and chorus. Now, go to any production of Le Conte Hoffmann, and you'll finally see that there are loads of productions which can be very creative, innovative, fantastical, and make a great use of scenery, costumes, and lots of other colors being thrown in the mix. However, there are some instances in which any production of Le Conte Hoffmann can be criticized as being iffy, odd, strange, almost of a very acquired taste, and at times a little bit nightmarish. Well, what's so interesting about this production is that it manages to combine some fantastical elements, which this opera is very well known for, yet combines some grotesque imagery, which can make audiences scratch their head and ask themselves, what the heck did we just watch? However, what really stands out about this production is that we not only have one, but three Hoffmanns. We have Hoffmann number one, who is an actor, and this Hoffmann is basically Hoffmann in his later years, and he's basically reminiscing about the times he has met Stella in a performance of Don Giovanni. We have Hoffmann number two, who is sung by a baritone, and this incarnation was basically to suggest that this was basically the vocal Fach that Offenbach initially had in mind, and Hoffmann number three is the tenor Hoffmann that we would have these days. And the staging overall is very stark and extremely dark all around, to the point where it's not trying to focus on a lot of fancy scenery or fancy costumes, but really make us really invested onto what is going on in Hoffmann's mind and what is going on with everything that he's experiencing throughout this opera. What's so disquieting was basically the ending. Now, you think that the opera would end with the Muse comforting Hoffmann and telling him that she will love him forever and she will be the one to protect him no matter what. This opera ends with Hoffmann finally going insane and the Muse singing La ci darem la mano with him as Hoffmann gets himself into a coffin with Le Conseiller Landorf just hammering the nails on there as if to say that the loves of Hoffmann were now dead in their own ways and he has nothing more to live. I almost forgot to say that what's also very interesting about Le Conte Hoffmann is that this opera was also based on a lot of the works done by Ernest Theodor Amadeus Hoffmann, who is also a real-life German author and playwright, whose works mainly include not only the likes of The Nutcracker, but also The Counselor Crespel and The Sandman, just to name a few. And that's where some of the characters were derived from these literary works. I really do like the dark atmosphere in this opera. It's as though we have entered Hoffmann's slowly decaying mind, yet really trying to make sure that he does get his happy ending, though it mainly came too late. The costumes are actually quite interesting to suit the overall weirdness. However, there is one costume I did not really care for, and that is Cochonille's costume in the Olympia act. The fact that he had to be dressed up as a girl made me really scratch my head in confusion and just made me really feel kind of sick to my stomach. What's also kind of funny was really seeing the male chorus dressed up in drag in the prologue, especially in the Antonia act as well, which kind of made me see that it's not only Hoffmann's mind I got myself into, but also that of the main villains' minds, as if though that we've basically entered their depraved mindsets. So overall, I'm very mixed with this production. Even though I love the dark atmosphere, which really makes a great use of a lot of really creepy yet unsettling moments in this opera, and I especially love the Antonia act, in which we see Hoffmann and Antonia really playing off of each other very, very well. There were just some things that kind of put me off, but not in the most negative way. It's just that it didn't really resonate me. But still, I have to give credit to the people behind this production for really putting in a lot of effort just to really make this production come alive. And now we get to the performances done by the singers, starting off with our three Hoffmanns. Hoffmann number 1, done by the actor Uwe Schönbeck. Hoffmann number 2, done by the baritone Dominique Koeninger, and Hoffmann number 3, done by the tenor Alexander Lewis. Now, Hoffmann really calls for a spinto tenor who can really sing lyrically yet dramatically at the same time. A lyrical voice isn't really enough for this very iconic tenor role. You really need a voice who can sing not only lyrically with all of those florid and really wonderful passages complete with the high notes, but also a very strong and scintillating voice with the right amount of squillo as well. In fact, there have been a lot of tenors who have embodied Hoffmann, the likes of Raoul Jobin, Rudolf Schock, Plácido Domingo, Neil Shikoff, Ramon Vargas, Marcelo Alvarez, Roberto Alagna, Arturo Chacon Cruz, and Matthew Polenzani, just to name a few. They have all found great successes as the title hero of this opera, mostly because of the great music he has to sing, whether it be L'air de Kleinsack or the aria that he sings in the act of Giulietta, and even a lot of his duets with Olympia, Antonia, and Giulietta. There's no doubt that you really need to have a great singing actor to really embody this iconic tenor role. I'd have to say that this role is very much the successor of Eleazar from La Juive, Arnold from Guillaume Tell, Rôle de Nangy from Les Huguenots, and to some extent Sanson from Sanson et Dalila. Now let's get on to the three Hoffmanns. Uwe Schönbeck as Hoffmann number 1 really does convey the agony, the madness, the nostalgia that he expresses, and the dimension that he manages to put out with this title character, and he delivers his lines with a sense of aplomb and at times a little bit of venom and lots of dimension to be added here and there. And then we have the baritone Hoffmann, Dominique Koeninger, who sings very, very well, even though I'm more accustomed to the tenor range of L'air de Kleinsack and a lot of Hoffmann's other solo numbers throughout this opera, I still have to really give my hat off to Mr. Koeninger for what he had to offer in terms of his voice and in terms of his acting. He did very well in terms of this baritone version of a very iconic tenor role. And Alexander Lewis as Hoffmann number 3 sang fabulously with a scintillating tone, managing to be very lyrical, and he was absolutely fine throughout the Antonia and Giulietta acts, even though I would have loved to have a lot more squillo in his voice, like have a voice very reminiscent of the likes of Enrico Caruso, Georges Thiel, Tony Ponce, Cesar Vezzani, Giuseppe Di Stefano, and many other great tenors of the past. I still have to give my hat off to Mr. Alexander Lewis for really doing a fine job with Hoffmann number 3. So in short, these 3 male performers really did some really fine performing with the 3 Hoffmanns. And then we get to Niklaus, aka the Muse, performed tonight by Carolina Gumos, who was also the mezzo who sang the role of the ghost of Antonia's mother. The role of Niklaus, or the Muse, really calls for a lyric mezzo or even that of a high dramatic mezzo who can be a very versatile singing actress. As the Muse, she has to be very womanly and very wise, and as Niklaus, she has to be very convincing as a young man. And in this production, what I seem to notice about the Muse is that he's basically meant to be like a spirit of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, considering the fact that the opera Don Giovanni is mentioned, especially through the narration of Hoffmann number 1. And I thought that Carolina Gumos continues to give off a very fine job thanks to her excellent musicianship and her wonderful timbre, which is so scintillating and so gorgeous to listen to. And her stage presence was absolutely fun all throughout, making Niklaus not only quite cheeky, but also very wise and a very fun character to watch on stage. She pulled it off very, very well, and she sang with such burnished tones and also such wonderful lyrical tones as well that I was absolutely immersed in her performance. And then we get to the 4 heroines, Olympia, Antonia, Giulietta, and Stella, sung tonight by Nicole Chevalier. This really takes a great amount of stamina, versatility, and vocal strength and agility to really pull off singing all 4 heroines. You need not look further than the likes of Rita Streich, Vina Bovey, Joan Sutherland, Beverly Sills, Elena Moshuk, Catherine Malfitano, Luciana Serra, Edita Grubarova. The list can go on and on and on for sopranos who have sung all 4 heroines. But if you look at them individually, you have Olympia, who is very well known for having a lot of these stratospheric high notes and is usually given to a light lyric coloratura soprano who not only has to have a lot of florid singing, but also has to hit a lot of the high notes as well. With Antonia, you really need a dramatic coloratura soprano or even that of a lyric soprano with a fine coloratura technique to be able to sing very floridly, yet manage to have a lot of really excellent coloratura techniques. And then Giulietta, who's usually given to a spinto soprano, a dramatic soprano, or in some occasions, a high dramatic mezzo, or at times a spinto soprano or a dramatic soprano with excellent high notes, as evidenced by her aria, which has often been cut out, L'amour lui dit la belle. And then you get Stella, who's usually performed by an actress. So when you combine these roles, this becomes a very exciting, yet very daunting challenge for any lyric coloratura or dramatic coloratura soprano. And I thought that with Nicole Chevalier, she managed to do a very wonderful job with all four heroines. Let's start off with what I thought about her Olympia. I thought she did very well in this role. However, there's something I seem to miss in this role in particular. I sort of missed the sweet, youthful, sparkling tones of any light lyric coloratura soprano that specializes in this role. The likes of Mado Robin, Maddy Mesplé, Nathalie Dessay in her prime, and even what we have today with Maria Aleida. But still, I thought that Miss Chevalier did very well in her first act as Olympia, but it's her interpretation of Antonia and Giulietta that really sell it for me. I thought that she was a lot better as Antonia in her really awesome act. She was able to make Antonia a very suffering character, which is helped by her superb acting chops and also her very excellent and agile voice, which is so homogeneous throughout all the registers. And you really get to feel the pain that Antonia has to go through. And it's very exciting from beginning to end. And I thought that with her interpretation of Giulietta, she managed to color her voice really, really well and make Giulietta sound slightly darker than her predecessors, Olympia and Antonia. So overall, I was very impressed with this really wonderful singer. She deserves the highest praise for everything that she pulled off with these four heroines. And she was able to really give something fun and different to each of these heroines that I was totally immersed through her performance. And then we get to the four villains, Landorf, Coppelius, Miracle, and Dappertutto, sung tonight by the wonderful Russian basso cantante Dmitry Ivashenko. Now, just like the four heroines, this calls for a bass baritone to really exude evil from every pore. There's no doubt that there has been some baritones, bass baritones, and bassos that would just mainly focus on one character, like you have one baritone or bass baritone be Landorf, or have another bass baritone be Coppelius, have a basso be Dr. Miracle, and have either a baritone or a bass baritone sing Dappertutto. And there have been some singers who have been specializing in one of these characters. However, ask any singer like George London, José Vendôme, Ruggero Raimondi, Samuel Ramey, Giorgio Surian, and Bryn Terfel, and you'd usually find them singing all four of these villainous roles. And this really takes a special type of bass baritone to not only sing all the low notes, but also some high notes as well. So the fact that he really needs a huge range has to be something to be recognized with. The four villains is just as coveted as the likes of Don Giovanni, Leporello, Boris Godunov, Hans Sachs, the Dutchman, Wotan, Fasolt, Heinrich der Vogler, and many other roles that are written for either a bass baritone or a basso cantante. And I thought that with Dmitry Ivashenko, my word, was he excellent in all of these four villainous roles. First of all, he has a very fine, cavernous, rumbling basso voice, which he loves to manipulate so well. And his stage presence is equally as strong. I was practically scared shitless every time he was on stage. That is just how much of a pro Mr. Ivashenko really is as a singing actor. he was able to make each character quite different from the other, yet still maintains that menace, venom, and overall scariness that he gives to each of these roles, yet also has a sense of being dashing on stage, which he did very convincingly. So, yeah, another kudos I have to give to an awesome singer like Mr. Ivashenko for really embodying each of the four villains with the right amount of venom, bite, and overall vitriol to really make each character come alive. And then in the roles of André, Spallanzani, and Pitichinaccio, we have Peter Renz, who has a very superb character tenor voice, which he loves to manipulate. And he was actually quite fine of a singer, even though his voice wasn't that huge in the house. He's a very fine musician, and his stage presence as an actor was totally engaging and totally a lot of fun to watch. And then we have Philipp Meyerhofer as Cochenil, Crespel, and Peter Schlemihl. I didn't care too much for his Cochenil, even though he managed to make him act very, very silly, yet kinda iffy with how I felt about him being in a dress. But I really loved his interpretation of Crespel and Peter Schlemihl. With Crespel, you really do get the feeling that he is a concerned Papa Wolf who was basically trapped by Dr. Miracle's machinations. And with Peter Schlemihl, you really do get the feeling that he does play the role of the jealous lover very, very well. And then special kudos also has to go to Carolina Gumos, who manages to sing the voice of Antonia's mother very, very well. Even though I would have loved to have a dramatic mezzo or a deep contralto singing this role, the likes of having Agnes Zvierko or Eva Podlesh or many other great contraltos singing this role, but I digress. So overall, this singing is of the highest order, and everyone was a pro. The conducting done by Maestro Daniel Hupert was equally as wonderful. So overall, I really have to say that despite some cuts and despite some moments where I've actually missed certain things, I have to say that the singing and the conducting and especially the chorus was especially fine all throughout. Everyone was a pro, and even if I had mixed feelings about this production, I have to give credit to everyone involved in there. From the director, Barry Kosky, to the one who designed the staging and the costumes, Katrin Leatag, to everyone involved in this production, I have to give my hat out to each and every one of them for at least having the right amount of effort that they've put into this opera and really making everything go in harmony in their own special way. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow where I review Mozart's Così fan tutte, starring Courtney Ross as Fiordaligi. So until then, good night, everybody.